Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is BestInSlot, and tonight I'm going to read out Chapter 3 of my in-progress dinosaur novel, The Crimson Jungle. Now, this is going to be a shorter video. Chapter 3 is only about 2,000 words, I think, and Chapter 4 is even shorter than that. I really dislike books that have very short chapters, books that have, say, a one-page chapter. It really annoys me, it always has done. But these two, whilst not nearly that short, they're definitely longer than a page. It'd be, say, 4 or 5 pages, I think, in a standard paperback book. They felt very distinctly like separate chapters, and together they would have been a bit too long. So I've done them as 2 separate ones, so we'll come back with Chapter 4 at some point next week. As per usual, it's worth remembering this is completely unedited. Lots of things may change between this and the final version. I know I say that every time, but I am going to say that every single time. For those who missed the first 2 episodes, I will link the playlist down below. If you click on that, you can hear both of those. And to catch people up who may have forgotten, at the last episode, Noah had given his conference, our main character gave his conference on de-evolution, and had just been introduced to a new character, a strange woman, whom you don't know the name of or the role quite yet. Well, until now, basically. So, sit back, enjoy, let's do Chapter 3. By the time the first plate of anemic scrambled eggs landed on the dining room table, Noah had lost his appetite. The woman, Clara, she said her name was, spread an old map across the linoleum covering and pinned down the edges with a salt shaker and an empty bottle of ketchup. The map was wonderfully detailed, an intricate drawing of a section of the Amazonian rainforest, complete with legions of emerald trees and a thick river meandering up through the middle before it split into tendrils of smaller streams and vanished over the horizon. Notes adorned near every inch of the map, references to dangerous wildlife, native tribes, safe resting points and clean water sources. One of those sources was ringed in messy circles of black biro, a cascading waterfall near the north end of the map, deep in the confines of the jungle, accompanied by a thickly lined red bracketed A symbol by its side. This, Noah, is the Amazon rainforest, or at least a little bit of it, Clara said after she'd let him look over the map for a while. The last great untamed wilderness of our world, or something. That's what my boss says anyway. I'm part of a recovery team that's been built to head here. She slipped a stubby pencil from her shirt pocket and placed a dot towards the top of the map, near the waterfall Noah had spotted. There's an ecological reserve here that's had a bit of trouble. A few of the scientists working there have been stranded in the lab over this way. She dragged the pencil downwards to something Noah hadn't spotted in his initial look. A grey rectangle hiding beneath the canopy, a dull concrete building that seemed bizarre and out of place in the midst of the wilds. The jungle is too dense for a helicopter extraction, and the Brazilian government has washed its hands of the situation, so we're going to go and get them out, and we'd like you to come along. Why me? Noah's first thought slipped out of his mouth before he even had time to process it. I'm a paleontologist, and these days an indoorsy one at that. I don't think I'll be much use to you knee-deep in the Amazon. I figured you'd probably say that. You're good at your job, Noah, and you used to be even better. We want talented people on our crew, and we need a talented paleontologist in particular. You see, this isn't just any ecological reserve, she responded, tapping the rubber end of the pencil on the lab. We need somebody who can tell us how the creatures in this reserve will think and act, because it's a dinosaur reserve. Noah waited for the punchline. The "do you think he saw us?" The ending to a joke he wasn't quite understanding yet, but none came. Clara sat straight-backed before him, eyes locked on his once more, unflinching. Straight-faced expression, I should change that, belied only by the slight trembling of her lower lip. Excitement? Worry? A dinosaur reserve, he finally replied, deadpan. A dinosaur reserve, she replied, just as deadpan. Okay. Noah raised his arms and rubbed his tired eyes. He sucked in a deep breath. It's a dinosaur reserve. Let's just pretend that isn't impossible for a minute and go from there. You want me to go with you into the middle of the Amazon rainforest to rescue some stranded scientists, right? Clara nodded. And this is despite my absolute lack of survival training or experience with the Amazon at all, right? Again, she nodded. Noah leaned back on his chair and closed his eyes. Images of the Amazonian bled into the darkness of his thoughts. Muddy rivers rife with piranhas, sweltering heat and humidity, jaguars prowling the hidden confines of the forest, and giant snakes trying to eat Jennifer Lopez. Admittedly, most of his thoughts of the Amazon came from creature feature horror films. Okay, so he wasn't liable to be eaten whole by a 50-foot anaconda. He wasn't going to be welcomed with open arms either. It was going to be dangerous, incredibly so, and the smart thing to do would be to hop on the train to Euston and hide away back in his small countryside home, safe and secure and perfectly normally average. Nothing was going to eat him in England after all. Probably. But why me? Why not any other paleontologist? He asked, his eyes still shut as Clara replied. Well, you're at the forefront of the evolution which, even if you don't yet believe me, is very relevant to what we're doing on this mission. But more than that, we know you've always requested dig site work. Every step throughout your career you've been out there in the field when you didn't have to be, getting your hands dirty. We need brilliant people who'd rather be out there experiencing their work than safely studying it from behind a microscope. Strong people who won't crack under what we're about to do. People like you, Noah. People like me? He hadn't been on a dig site in months now. Strong was not something he'd felt lately. Tired maybe? Sure, he could do that. Hungry sometimes too. But strong? Not Noah. He opened his eyes and averted the gaze of his new companion. Instead he looked around at the packed dining hall. He looked at the peeling wallpaper and the stained cream carpet, and the exhilarated paleontologists shoving tepid breakfast foods into their mouths as they spoke with excitement about the ongoing conference. This was it for them. This is what they lived for. The thrill of discovery, the chance of a scientific breakthrough, that swirling in the pit of your stomach as you stand on the cusp of greatness or failure. Noah hadn't felt that alive in a long time. He finally turned his gaze back to Clara. She smiled as she reached into her small leather bag and retrieved a stack of documents, pushing them across the table towards him. She rolled the stubby pencil across and pointed to a dotted line alongst the bottom of the page. Sign here. A week later, Noah was in Brazil. The 7 days previous had been a blur of activity as he'd had to require a work visa for the trip and stock up on supplies as stipulated by an equipment list Clara had given him. She hadn't said much else and had vanished soon after their meeting at the Keystone Hotel, to recruit other members of their expedition apparently. People at the university where Noah worked were naturally confused. It's hard to give solid reasoning for why you're taking a sabbatical during a particularly exciting time in your research when you yourself don't really know why. But here he was, boots down on the tarmac of a Brazilian airport, camo-coloured clothing and hefty backpack all. The research into de-evolution was still decades away from completion, and it'd be there when he got home, he reasoned. If he got home, he reminded himself. Assuming insects didn't eat him alive, he was pretty sure he'd soon melt under the oppressive heat. Nary a single cloud pockmarked the early morning sky, and the sun seemed to relish the opportunity to beat down with vehemence on the tarmac around him. Noah wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his arm and pulled down the tip of his baseball cap in a futile attempt to block out the glare. God damn, it's hot. For now, he was the only member of their party at the small airport, a private base hidden away in a manor house field. There was nothing much to look at other than the stretch of greyed tarmac and a small open warehouse nearby, which itself housed a pair of red biplanes that looked like they'd barely fit a pilot, never mind Noah and his equipment. Noah silently prayed to nobody in particular that they had a different ride coming. Clara had been light on the details, something he was already coming to expect from her, but she'd mentioned a couple of other scientists that had been coming on the trip along with a navigator and some ex-army members for protection. As for the rest of the mission, as she called it, that would be disclosed on the journey over to the Amazon basin. Noah! Clara's voice came from behind him, and he turned to see her emerge from the warehouse-esque plain storage building. She was dressed similar to him, camo clothing, filled to the brim black backpack, and her auburn hair pulled tightly back in a ponytail. She looked ready for war, but for now at least, she seemed happy to see him. Clara, you ready to go? We ship out in just under an hour, 0900 sharp. I'm all good, he nodded in response. 0900? Should I salute? Clara's face instantly tinged with red, though whether that was the fault of embarrassment or the sweltering heat, he couldn't tell. Sorry, 9 a.m, yeah. She rubbed the back of her neck with her palm, digging her short-trimmed nails into her skin. Ex-military. Old habits die hard. You're ex-military? Noah asked, realising he didn't actually know what Clara's role on this trip was. Yeah, medic. Long time ago, she responded with a faint grimace, seemingly annoyed with herself for letting that detail slip. That's why I'm here, to keep you guys alive after the crocodiles have got hold of you. Or the dinosaurs. She chuckled quietly, not something Noah had expected from her after her somewhat stoic performance back in England. Or the dinosaurs, yes. One of the men travelling with us should have more details for you on that. A Professor Richardson, I believe. I don't know much else, just here to get you guys to the lab. And keep us alive. If there's time. The sound of leather on tarmac broke up the conversation, and Noah turned to see two hazy figures approaching them from across the airport. One was an older man, at least 6'4" and probably mid-50s I'd guess, with a schlock of paper white hair dragged over his prominent bald spot and a thick scraggly beard hanging from his slackening jowls. He introduced himself as Professor Richardson with a bone-crushing handshake and a hard slap on Noah's shoulder. "Ah, Mr. Henderson, what a pleasure," Richardson boomed, his bushy beard shaking as he spoke. "Heard so much about you. A pleasure, a pleasure. Oh!" He swiftly turned to the person standing beside him, a woman so meek in stature and posture she almost disappeared behind the barrel-chested professor. "And this is Gwyn, an undergrad student down at Oxford with me. Botany, yes, very talented she is too, top of her class, so I hear. Taking a year out. 18, can you believe it? 18! Not so big on the plants myself, no. Give me a nice virus any day." He let out a roaring laugh as he caught himself. "Oh no, I'm in virology, you see, son." Another hard slap on Noah's shoulder. Same spot. Gwyn finally emerged forward and shook Noah's outstretched hand, though if she was applying any pressure whatsoever, he certainly couldn't feel it. The woman looked simply terrified. Her beady black eyes darted back and forth between their new companions as she tugged hard at a few loose strands of her tightly bound dark hair. Her skin was so pale, Noah was surprised she hadn't burst into flame the moment she stepped into the sunlight. Gwyn Macclesfield, the small woman named herself before pulling her arm hastily away and retreating back behind the professor. Noah responded with his own name and a warm smile in an attempt to calm the nervous student. It didn't seem to work. "Sorry to have to interrupt," Clara thankfully intruded, "but our ride is here." She pointed behind Noah and he span to see a dark shape rise over the ridge of the warehouse, blocking out the morning sun and casting a long, shifting shadow on the party of four. The dull whirring of helicopter rotor blades filled the sky, growing louder and louder as the bulky, elongated vehicle approached and began its gradual descent downwards. It was not a typical helicopter. Bullet holes pockmarked the lower reaches of its near flank, and spots of faded green-brown paint peeked through the bright yellow that now covered most of the hull. It seemed to have been painted in a hurry to attempt to cover up the old camouflage paint job. But it was clear what it was. Ex-military, just like Clara. "A Chinook! Fantastic!" Richardson infused, clapping his meaty hands together as he heaved his rucksack onto his shoulders and clambered forwards, dragging the hesitant Gwyn alongside him. Noah stood back for a moment, side by side with Clara as they observed the pair climb inside. "He's a character, huh?" Noah asked. Clara didn't say anything, but he saw the corner of her mouth turn upwards as she slipped on her own backpack and followed the others into the belly of the beast.